Hi, hello, and welcome to Introduction to Economics. So this is the very first lesson. Yeah, my name is Josiah, and without further ado, let's get right into it. All right. So some housekeeping rules: be respectful, be kind, be punctual. You're always in charge of your own destiny, and so I like to stress that this also includes learning. And probably I'd like to bring up your attention to number point five, which is to relax as well. Studying is already difficult. Now being stressed doesn't make it any easier. Right. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. There's a little story that I usually like to start before I teach any class. So today's story is the Tomorrow Monkeys. So it's a group of a family of monkeys who was sitting in the tree. It was dark, it was rainy, it was cold, and the little monkey just said, we should build a house. And mommy monkey said, yes, we should build a house. Daddy monkey said, yes, we should build a house. And all the other little monkeys said, yes, we should build a house. Let's build a house tomorrow. But when the sun came up and the clouds rolled away, the sky was clear, the weather was great, everyone started to play, and they forgot all about building the house. One little monkey asked, shouldn't we build a house? Well, the reply was, we'll build a house tomorrow. But then the sun set, and the clouds rolled back in. The rain started to fall. It was cold, it was miserable. And then the littlest monkey said again, we should build a house. And Mummy Monkey said, yes, we should build a house. Daddy Monkey said, yes, we should build a house. Yes, let's build a house tomorrow. All right, so I believe this is a Brazilian parable. So hopefully you'll find it interesting and a cool way to start the lesson, right? All right, so today's lesson will cover basically 6 aspects: scarcity, opportunity cost, specialization, PPF, production possibility frontier, efficiency, and markets. All right, so the videos will be split into 15 minutes each. So I guess in between videos, you'll have your coffee break then, right? So let's start. What exactly is economics, right? So economics really started off and when people kind of try to examine the relationship between wealth and how countries became rich. So that was how economics started off, if you like. But now in the modern day understanding of economics, it's how the behavior of people is like depending on the limited resources that we have. Okay, so if I put it in very common layman terms, economics it's about human behavior in a management of very limited resources. So and this really kind of brings the whole point of what the whole economic problem or whole of what economics is really about. It's the problem of how to make the best use of very limited resources to satisfy the unlimited wants of people. Everybody has unlimited wants, but we only have limited resources. How? What should we do? That's really what economics is about. So, as I've mentioned just now, the most important point about economics is that resources are finite. There's only limited resources. So we call this concept scarcity, and it's not a very abstract concept. Um, in 2020, there was a shortage or perceived shortage of toilet paper. I wonder why. Okay, so there was basically no toilet paper around, right? So in some places, you see some people the way they bought the toilet paper, and even in New Zealand, some people end up paying thousands, bidding thousands for toilet paper. So that shows you that scarcity, even though it's a theoretical concept, but when it is an observation also that happens in the real world, right? And when it does happen, you see how people behave. So scarcity is really about how people behave, shapes how we behave, depending on the limited number of resources that we have. Okay, so if we have limited resources, what does this mean? So what if it means that we have limited resources? So because we have limited resources, when we want to do something, it means that we have to give up something else, right? So this is called an opportunity cost. Okay, so the opportunity cost is so-called the loss or the cost you bear in order to take another action. I want to do action one, but to do action one, I have to give up all the things that I could have done with action, with the resources saved from using action one. Sounds complex. Okay, maybe let's take an example. Let's say you have an exam the next day or the next week, but you decide to watch a movie, right? The movie is 2 hours, $25 with popcorn. So those are the costs. The 2 hours, the cost, the $25, that's the cost. But the opportunity cost is what you could have done with the 2 hours and the $25. All right. So it's the loss you take to make a gain or an action, or the loss of one gain for another gain. So, all right. Because of that, we come into this idea of a comparative and absolute advantage. So comparative advantage is basically the advantage I have in comparison to somebody else. All right. So let's say we have two individuals, Tom and Jerry, okay, and they can both produce two goods or two things, right? Produce two things, pet food and cheese. Okay. So Tom can produce, he's better at producing cheese, basically. He can produce 4 units of cheese in 1 hour, right? And Jerry can produce 4 units of pet food in 1 hour. So we can say that Tom is better. We can see that Tom is better at producing cheese, right? Because he produces 4 cheese per hour. So we can say that Tom actually has the comparative advantage over Jerry for producing cheese. So so if I put it in layman's term, compared to Jerry, Tom has an advantage in producing cheese. So when we change that into like economic speak, we say that Tom has the comparative advantage for producing cheese, and the same holds true for Jerry, right? Jerry, compared to Tom, Jerry has the advantage in producing pet food. Therefore, we can say that Jerry has a comparative advantage for producing pet food. But I mentioned about absolute advantage, right? So what is absolute advantage about? Absolute advantage is when you are better at producing both goods. So let's say a third person comes in. Let's say I come in, I'm a third person. I can produce 5 units of cheese per hour or 5 units of pet food per hour. And 5 units of pet food per hour. So I produce both. I have an absolute advantage. Okay, I am better at producing both goods than both of them. Okay, but all this has an underlying assumption. All this whole behavior, right, scarcity, all this has all one underlying assumption. It's called rationality. So rationality is when people behave logically or rationally, right? So they always try to seek to maximize their satisfaction, which in economics we call utility, right? They try to satisfy their utility. So, but in real life, that's not necessarily true. People don't just want to satisfy their utilities. People behave in all sorts of funny ways, right? And in Moneyball, the story of the Oakland A's, the baseball team, it does show, right, how people do not behave in the most rational way due to the whole host of reasons, right? He throws funny, he doesn't have a pretty girlfriend, whatever, right? So people don't actually behave very rationally all the time, but the assumption is that people have to act rationally, okay, based on all the information available, that they try to maximize their utility. Okay, so now we have all kind of described everything, right? If we kind of put it into a graph, okay, we will end up with a graph that looks something like this. This graph is called a PPF, or Production Possibility Frontier. Okay, so it generally takes a shape of a curve, generally speaking, because there's something called marginality or marginal analysis. Okay, so what exactly is marginal analysis? We'll touch on that in the next slide. But first, how do we read the PPF? So, okay, so PPF usually you look at, in this case, we use a simple example, a PPF with two goods, two products, right? So in this country from Investopedia, on one side, on the left-hand side, you can see that the product is wine. On the right-hand side, the product is cotton. And this is the curve, right? The PPF. Points on the PPF, so A, B, and C, points on the PPF is considered as being efficient, productive efficient. because you cannot produce one more unit of product A without sacrificing the production of product B. Okay, to produce one more bottle of wine, you have to produce one less bale of cotton. So that's when you know that you're on the maximum level of efficiency. Okay, point Y means it's something that is not possible. It's just outside that of the capability of your economy. Asking Singapore, a landlocked tiny island, to produce maybe 50 billion tons of corn a year, it's just going to be a Y for Singapore, right? Point Y for Singapore, right? And conversely, point X is when it's underutilized, right? A country has a lot of resources, but it's not being fully utilized. You will have point X. Okay. So this is underemployment, not possible. This is maximum employment. Okay. So as I mentioned, marginality or marginal analysis, that's the whole point of the idea of the rate of increase, right? So example, you go for a run, you come back from a run, you're really tired, you're hot, you're thirsty. So you drink your first can of Coke, ice Coke, Coca-Cola. That first can of Coke produces the maximum level of utility, right? You feel, oh, this is so good, the best. You drink the second can, it still feels, so good, but not the best anymore, right? It is good, but not that great. The third can, even less satisfying. So we can see here in this kind of example, you can see that the rate of increase is lesser and lesser, right? You still drink the same amount of increase. Each time it's still one can of Coke, but the level of satisfaction increase is no longer the same, right? And we'll reach a point that even drinking the extra can of Coke gives you zero additional satisfaction, correct? So that's when your marginal utility is zero. There's no longer an increase, right? Based off, even despite the fact that you got an increase in the can of Coke, right? So an extra input, if you like, produces an additional change in the output, but the amount of output change may be different from the level of input. Okay. So PPFs generally, like I mentioned, are curves, right? But if let's say your rate of change, your marginal opportunity cost is always constant, you will actually have a straight line PPF, and that looks something like that. So using the example from Mr. Bank's tuition, the rate of change, every time he increases the production of missiles, he has to lessen production of guns this way. So it's a constant, right? It's not like there's a change. Whereas in this particular case, when he moves from, say, he increases from 5 to 7, the amount that he has to give up, the amount of gun production he has to give up is significantly higher than, say, if he moved from 0 to 2. Okay, so there's this concept of the marginal MEC, marginal efficiency curve. So we'll touch on that in the next lesson. But for now, this is what we're going to be talking about. And this is where I kind of end the first part of the video, because YouTube only allows 15-minute videos. So we'll pick up from the next part of the lesson after the break. All right, in the next video. And